Okay, salam and good day, everyone. Welcome to this online forum entitled Curriculum and Instruction in Online Learning. This forum is organized by MyRIVET, which is Malaysia Research Institute for Vocational Education and Training, led by University Tun Hussein on Malaysia. And my name is Mimi Mohamed. I'm from Center for Language Studies, University Tun Hussein on Malaysia, and I will be the moderator for this forum. So first, let me brief you on how this forum will be conducted. This forum will be divided into three segments. In the first segment, each panelist will have about 5 minutes to share her input based on the prompt that I will give them. In the second segment, all the panelists will come together and discuss issues or points or maybe perhaps arguments that they want to raise during this segment, which will be about 20 minutes. And then in the third segment, this is where the Q&A session will be. So if you want to ask questions, please register your name on the right-hand side on your screen. There's a chat box there. Please write your name and your institution. If you want to ask the question directly, just write your name and institution, and I will call you during that session. But if you don't want to ask the questions directly, you can just type out your questions there, and I will read the questions for you. All right. So without further ado, let me first introduce you to our first panelist, Professor Gloria Dall'Alba. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. That's Gloria. Correct. So she's an honorary associate professor in the School of Education at the University of Queensland. She's also the director of GD Higher Education Consulting. Her research focuses on learning and teaching in higher education and the workplace, with a particular interest in educating for the professions and the philosophy of higher education. The next panelist is Professor Bahr. She is the Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Students of Southern Cross University, New South Wales, Australia. She is a Professor of Education at Southern Cross University since 2017. And she is also an adjunct professor at Griffith University and Queensland University of Technology. I want to share one interesting fact about Professor Bahr is that she is a senior officer bearing the title of Colonel, so don't mess with her, in the Australian Defence Force for 37 years. She has been awarded the Prince of Wales Award, the Australian Defence Medal, and the Defence Service Long Service Medal with first and second class. She is currently appointed as honorary aide-de-camp to the Governor General of Australia. So as I said, don't mess with her. All right, the next panelist is Dr. Rosemaliza Kamalludeen. She's an assistant professor at the Department of Curriculum and Instruction, International Islamic University, Malaysia. She has a history of working in the education management industry. Her expertise centers around curriculum and instruction, educational technology, adult education, and qualitative research. Her PhD research focused on career and technical education from Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University. All right, so I've already introduced you to all the panelists that will be involved in this forum. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the recent outbreak of COVID-19 has, in a way, forced learning institutions in many countries to be closed, and the teaching and learning process has shifted from face-to-face to full online learning. This shift is believed to have great impacts on both teachers and students. And whether they like it or not, this is here to stay. And this is the new norm of teaching and learning for the moment, all right? So, but the question now is, to what extent does the existing curriculum and support this online learning? How should the curriculum in online learning look like? So to respond to this, I would like to call upon Professor Gloria.
Thank you, Mimi, and thank you for the invitation to be with you all today. As a background to answering that initial question, Mimi, I'd like to remind us all that online learning was already becoming pervasive in higher education in many countries even before COVID-19, and sometimes it might be helpful for us to remember that. And this includes whether students were in the same city or whether they were studying across the globe in different countries. So, for instance, you know, there were recorded lectures available online in a number of courses, online discussion forums, students even manipulating lab equipment online at a distance from where they were, and so on. And in many cases previously, of course, online learning had been combined with face-to-face learning, but that wasn't always possible even before, and now that's become potentially more problematic in these COVID-19 times. So in thinking about curriculum design then, a question that comes to me is, what are we designing curricula for? It seems to me a central question. So if we take a step back, we can be aware that online learning is often associated with perceived innovation. So if it's online, it must be innovative. It's also often associated with broader access to knowledge, including for disabled or remote students. And it's also associated with extending learning spaces beyond classrooms. So we can be sitting, as we are today, in very different locations, all working potentially on a common course or project. And online learning is often also associated with increased flexibility. We can learn wherever we are. But it seems to me that the rapid expansion of online learning, even prior to our current situation, has to be scrutinised carefully in terms of the purposes of higher education. So I think we need to think carefully about whether we're educating people primarily to fill current employment gaps, or do we think we're educating people primarily to be work ready when they graduate? Or are we primarily educating people to contribute to communities in informed and responsible ways, or some other purpose? And I think those are questions we need to continually come back to when we're thinking about curriculum design. What are we designing it for? And it seems to me that these main purposes of higher education influence the use of both online technologies, but also they influence our curriculum design. So they're very important even in terms of thinking about the curriculum design process and content. And I would want to argue that available digital technologies must not be the main driver for teaching and learning, but those purposes of higher education. So it seems to me critically important that the technologies serve the purposes of higher education, not the reverse. And of course, there are challenges in curriculum design in an online environment, but some of these, it seems to me, are also similar for face-to-face contexts. And when we can feel that so much has happened so quickly, it can also be perhaps reassuring to remind ourselves that some of the challenges are similar. We've faced them before. So for instance, a very important curriculum principle for me is that we must have curriculum goals, carefully thought out, hopefully, but curriculum goals that are consistent with the learning activities that we ask students to engage in, and also consistent with the forms of assessment that are going to demonstrate whether or not students have achieved the learning goals in ways that support the purposes of we see for higher education. And of course, while that consistency across learning goals, learning activities, and assessment is something that's shared in online environments and face-to-face environments, in online environments, learning activities, of course, often need to take somewhat different forms. So some activities are less readily possible online, for instance, hands-on lab classes. And I think that's an important consideration. Assessment will often also need to take different forms. So one of the things I'm hearing in the Australian context is that take-home exams are becoming more common than they previously were, as one example. But it seems to me again that these changes to curriculum must reflect the learning goals as well as the purposes of higher education. So we have to adjust them for the online environment, but we must also keep in mind this question of what are we developing curriculum for? What are we teaching for in terms of the purposes of higher education? And it seems to me that getting consistency across learning goals, learning activities and assessment is a challenge for curriculum, whether or not it's online, whether or not it's a combination of online and face-to-face. A benefit of online learning, it seems to me, is that it can be a means of preparing students for their futures in a digitalised world. So through using the technologies as part of online courses in the higher education environment, we can prepare students to become familiar with some of those technologies. But of course, learning to use the technologies isn't enough in itself. Again, they must be used in support of those purposes of higher education. And I think it's a challenge to do this in a way that isn't dictated by the technologies themselves, but is done in a way that supports our purposes. I think a risk in online learning, in terms of our curriculum design, is that we may think of learning only in terms, or primarily in terms of mind and cognition. So students and teachers may seem more disembodied with a higher focus on the mind. But of course, we know that learning affects the whole person. We see this especially in the transformation of students to engineers, pharmacists, teachers, and so on. So there aren't only changes to their knowledge and their thinking, but also how they're learning to be as contributors to communities. And it seems to me that it's critically important that curriculum design take into account this transformation of the person. So in summary then, it seems to me that curriculum design must reflect the purposes of higher education, not simply available technologies. Second, that it's important we have consistency across learning goals, learning activities and assessment in support of those purposes. Third, that the design of learning activities and assessment needs to take account of the online setting as well as the purposes. And finally, that curriculum design must foster transformation of whole persons in support of the purposes of higher education. And I'll leave it there.
Yeah, so those are the 4 key points in designing online curriculum: the purpose, consistency, the setting, online setting, and also the transformation that it gives to the students or future graduates. All right, so we will move on to Professor Nan. Now, Professor Gloria mentioned earlier that online learning has been in practice, but still we hear everywhere that this is a bit problematic. It's a big jump to for both the teachers and the students. So from the perspective of the students, Professor Nan, because you've been working with students at your university, so how do they take this in?
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll just go ahead then, shall I, Mimi? Yes.
Yep. Yes.
So I didn't ring and check with Professor Dall'Alba before we spoke, and it's quite exciting to hear that we have very, very similar opinions and views on things that she's raised. Although I'm taking a slightly different perspective. I thought that I'd answer your question with just a tiny wee bit of background. So Southern Cross University is a regional university. It serves a community, an inland city, and it has some campuses around the place. But certainly, its base is in an inland city that's not used to working online. Although we certainly have a number of students over recent times increasingly joining us online. My position as a Deputy Vice-Chancellor students involves my my oversight, if you like, of the student experience. And this gives me a particular insight to how this change in mode of delivery has occurred for our students. My portfolio looks after welfare and wellbeing, and so I have the counselling service and a range of other supports, which I've been able to see into the levels of distress that have faced and report as a result of what has been for us a very, very quick turnaround without pause from blended learning to completely online. And I think that therein has been some of the difficulty. So you ask the question, how do the students deal with the shift from face-to-face to full-on learning? Well, to be direct, generally not well. This is not because they're not familiar with online environments, they are. Nor is it because they're necessarily uncomfortable with a sudden shift in the mode of learning. It's because the quick turnaround has put the content presentation ahead of the design for learning, at least at my institution, and I'm aware of it being elsewhere also. The speed of the shift to online has seen us enduring the worst of online pedagogy, to my mind. Time was against us, and by the word us, I mean the academics that were responsible for as they say, pivoting, which I think is an unfortunate term. It sort of seems to evoke thoughts of just turning on the spot to a different way rather than necessarily redesigning the spot that you stand on. The result has been, in many instances, what I've seen as the best possible approach to teaching and learning. Now, I don't mean to, I'm not saying terrible things about my own institution. I've been watching carefully around a number of institutions, I have to say. What I've seen has been whole lectures recorded and served to students as passive consumers. The lecture notes and readings have been curated and simply loaded up for students to access. Sometimes Word documents changed to PDF and just served on a platter. For school children who've been working at home, there have been online worksheets to complete. For tertiary education, online quizzes. These approaches treat students as passive recipients of information rather than active learners. And I understand why it happened. I understand why academics made these decisions with the learning, but it reminds us, I think, to think carefully about how we might better engage with the importance of technology. So in my view, online pedagogy requires careful design with these following principles, and I have 5 of them. I just want to check that I'm still coming through, because several people have started to freeze. So Mimi, if you could just wave or something. Is it still working? Fantastic.
Yes,
so
it
these
is.
These are the 5 principles. Firstly, learning is active and requires meaningful interaction. Secondly, learning needs to be authentic with relevance and context. Third, learning is socially mediated. Fourth, learning is activated through language. And 5, learning is personal. So for best effect, online pedagogy needs to demand student attention, provide opportunities for interaction, simulate real-life contexts, require their application of the concepts to novel situations, and give them opportunity to share their ideas with others. Effective online learning, in my view, is purposefully designed for heightened engagement. But even if an academic has gone to great lengths to package the material, to design for application and interaction, students may still seek to engage. This is because presentation environments of Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Skype and others are more confronting than a face-to-face classroom. It's not a natural environment. Every participant is on camera, and to contribute to discussion, individuals need to be forthright and confident. the speed of the conversation can slow down, and the control of the conversation is heavily moderated. For many students, this can reinforce disengagement. It takes a very skilled teacher to manage the learning inclusively. And I have to say, many teachers, in my experience, turned to online teaching without having that skill under their wing. Many students have been reporting to me that they're struggling. The demand for them is for greater self-reliance and self-regulation to manage their learning as they wade through piles of curated materials. There's a sense that they're getting a weaker product and they're not as confident in their learning. Basically, poorly designed online teaching has left some students anxious, lacking confidence in their abilities and disconnected from their peers. Now, I don't want to sound so terribly negative. I'm an advocate. I have a long history of advocating for the affordances of technology and learning, and I can only see that with careful design, it's an absolute boost to learning. But I think that this current COVID situation has challenged the design angle. So for most students in academics, the shift to online hasn't been ideal. What we've learnt during this time is that online doesn't have to be passive. Online can be creative. In the hands of the skilled teacher and with purposive design, the gap between effective learning online and in person can indeed be narrowed. And we've seen that with a lot of the differences in the way children have engaged through learning online at home during the COVID crisis. They can be enhanced. The learning can be enhanced by allowing students to go back over their materials, to pause and reflect on their learning. Students can even connect with global community of learners, which Professor Dall'Alba mentioned. So I'm not anti-online. I'm an advocate, truly, for well-designed online learning. The affordances of technology are tremendous, but the difference is where we start, not with the content, but with the design for learning and with the learners always. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Nan. I think you have raised a few things there, particularly about the skilled teachers. So, and then from the part of Professor Gloria, she mentioned that online learning has been in practice and it shouldn't be in some way a big problem to students. So there is a bit of a contradicting situations in that sense. So what about Dr. Rose in Malaysia? What do you think in terms of the curriculum, instruction, and also the students?
Okay, Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me to this wonderful panel and listening to both professors on their take about online learning and what is happening down under, I suppose. I would have the same stance as both professors that, of course, learning design, the goal of the education itself takes center stage in whatever that we do in terms of education, be it higher education, lower education. The goal of the curriculum should be the one that drives whatever changes that we're going through, whatever curriculum design that we are going to do. So in terms of the Malaysian context, I think I would like to let both professors know good news that Malaysia will come out with our movement control order. We're going to be slightly flexible starting tomorrow. That is good news for everybody, but still, learning as a group in schools and in higher education institutions are still not allowed. So we are still going on with the online learning. I think, Mimi, if you could just, ask everybody to mute, I suppose, because I'm hearing noises. I'm not sure where it's coming from, though. Okay, now in the Malaysian context, right, when we talk about the shift to this online learning, as Professor Gloria, I think, just now mentioned, that it is not new. In Malaysia, it's not new as well. We have been doing a lot of online learning initiatives, you know, as a collective voice, as a nation. We have gone through a lot of, you know, digitalization of our education. But the thing is, it's not a culture. Online learning, it's not a culture in Malaysia, not yet, because setbacks that we need to address, especially in terms of access, in terms of technology access, in terms of coverage, and also we have got people who are underprivileged, who do not have access to technology. Therefore, face-to-face education still prevails in Malaysia. However, we do put in a lot of initiatives like the blended learning initiative, which all universities should conduct all of their you know, teaching and learning via blended learning mode, which is a certain percentage is online and a certain percentage is face-to-face. So we have been putting that in place since I think 2015 to 2014, 2015. Yeah, but when COVID took over the world, I would say universities were forced to shift towards online learning because of, you know, we can't meet face-to-face. Now, when we shifted, all of this curriculum design and all that were sort of, I would not want to say that they are not being looked upon, but rather we were in a hurry. We sort of didn't take time perhaps to sit down and really redesign the whole thing. Because now, for the benefit of the audience, designing online learning and designing face-to-face instruction are totally two different things, because the experiences are different. You know, when we are learning, when reflect back when you were in school, when you were in the university, you know, what actually happens when you learn? You go through some sort of an experience. You go to the campus, you feel something, you have friends, interaction and all that. So the experience learning face-to-face and learning online are totally different. Therefore, when we talk about curriculum design, it is not a matter of just changing the skin, you know, of this instruction towards using technology tools, you know, having take-home exams and all that. It's not as simple as that. Basically, literally, we have to go back to the drawing board if we want online learning to be, you know, to be effective and also serve the purposes of those curriculum goals that we talked about earlier, right? And for Malaysia, when we talk about curriculum goals, Malaysia has our own national education philosophy that we hold on to. What is the purpose of education in Malaysia? So I'm just going to reiterate our national education philosophy. Education in Malaysia is an ongoing effort towards further developing the potential of individuals in a holistic and integrated manner to produce individuals who are intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, and physically balanced and harmonic based on a firm belief and devotion to God. So this effort of producing individuals, citizens who are balanced, is to achieve this goal of every citizen being able to contribute to the harmony and betterment of the family, the society, and the nation at large. So that is what we hold on to in terms of our national education philosophy. Now that's our education goal. When we look at generally, when a person gets educated, right, he or she should come out a better person. From a person not knowing anything to somebody who is knowledgeable, from not being able to do something to being skillful, and somebody who is ignorant to somebody who is compassionate. So these are basically what we in Malaysia are trying to achieve in terms of our education. When we talk about online learning, it is a method of delivery. It is a delivery. So it is part of curriculum design, definitely. But then when you know, I've mentioned that we have to go back to the drawing board, and then online learning is not the same as face-to-face. Even when we design for experiences like blended learning, we have got to relook into the alignment of you know, curriculum goals, learning activities, and assessment to achieve these goals. Yeah. So in Malaysia, what I look at that has changed, or perhaps I would not want to say change as in something new, but rather to bring back what we educational technologists have been advocating. Yeah, with technology, I mean, technology is there to make our lives better, and with that, there are 4 changes that, you know, takes place when we embed or when we use technology in education. The first change is that education has shifted from a public space to personal space. When we go to school, we go to the university, education happens in this public space, in the social arena. But now we have also to look at the personal spaces that we are taking when students learn from home, right? So that's the first change. The second one, from one-size-fits-all curriculum to individualized and differentiated. When we are in a public space, it is, you know, it's convenient, or it makes sense for us to design the curriculum so that everybody will be, you know, will get the same activities, will get the same assignments, the same, you know, learning outcomes. But now, when the learning has shifted to a personal space, we can take advantage of this to designing curriculum that is individualized and differentiated and meet the needs of each individual. Right, so that's the second shift. The third one, now we are looking at roles of the family and the community. Before this, parental roles or the family roles in education are generally passive. But now, because the learning has shifted into the personal space, they become active agents of learning. So the parents, brothers, sisters, siblings, family, you know, the people surrounding the learner now become agents of learning who will also facilitate the learning process. Now, the fourth change is from exam-centric to meaningful formative assessments. Now, this is where we need to redesign evaluation of learning. How are we going to assess learning now in this personal space, in this individualized and differentiated arena? And also, we have got the society around us, the household around us. How can we take advantage in terms of evaluating learning? So this is my take on the whole curriculum design for online learning. So again, I concur with the other 2 panelists, in which, you know, curriculum design prevails, the goal of education prevails. So we look at these changes in terms of what can we leverage with technology in terms of curriculum design to give learners a better learning experience, rather than just, you know, sitting in front of the computer and Zooming the whole day. So yeah, thank you, Mimi. I think that's my take for now.
All right, thank you, Dr. Rose. So all the panelists have already put through what they think about the curriculum, designing the curriculum and instruction in terms of online learning. So now we will go to the second segment, which is where all the panelists will come together and have a bit of discussion. Just to start the ball rolling, I will raise one issue, which is about assessment. I can't help but think about assessment. Now, Dr. Rose has mentioned about the assessment being shifting from exam-centric to meaningful formative evaluation. And also Professor Gloria has also mentioned about this take-home assessment is a normal, a kind of a common thing, particularly in Australia. So, and then Prof. Nan has also raised the issues of her students of not being sort of familiar or not really familiar with online learning due to the circumstances that she has already mentioned. So can we just discuss a little bit about this assessment in terms of curriculum design? So I think anyone...
Who wants to go first? Do we go rock, paper, scissors?
Sorry?
Jump in. I'll jump in. So
okay.
Assessment needs to be directly connected to the learning outcomes, of course. And learning outcomes are a reflection, in my view, of where it's likely to be demonstrated in the future. So therefore, if it's a practical, then you need to get it possible in the design of the assessment to simulate, if you're going to use online tools, that practical circumstance. The question that I have is about the challenge for assessment for learning using technology in this way. Assessment as a platform for learning rather than of learning. In lots of circumstances, technology tools allow us to find out how much a student knows and allow them to respond, but in terms of designing a platform for them to actually learn through their assessment, it can be more challenging. This is particularly true if there's a focus on what I'd call production quality in terms of the way students might submit their assessment. So, for example, if we only provide students with videos that have been produced in a studio and so forth, then they become a little bit reticent to make videos of themselves in practical situations and share. But just about everybody now has a camera or video recorder in their pocket, and it can be a very useful way into allowing students to engage online and develop resources and materials for which allow them to engage with assessment learning. There you go. I wonder if that strikes a chord with the other two panelists.
I think this gives a lovely example of the way in which Rose was talking about this idea of making learning a better learning experience. Well, we could debate whether that's realistic, but if we put that debate aside, it seems to me that we can certainly try to work on making the learning experience better than perhaps we've done in the past. I would hope that's always what we're striving for. But this idea of having students take technologies that they're already familiar with, their phones, that they're already using often, and using them as part of a recording exercise that may then count towards their assessment, if done carefully, it seems to me is an example of one possible creative use of technologies in a way that can contribute to learning rather than just being about assessing the learning that has occurred, you know, in the way that Nan talked about. So I think in a way, whenever there's change, it gives us an opportunity to rethink the way we usually do things and to think a little outside the box. And I think that's the advantage of being put in a position where we have to think about going entirely online. And I agree with Rose that this is a different experience of learning for students. And it seems to me that's really important to keep in mind when we think about designing learning activities and also designing assessment.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Gloria and Prof. Nan. I think taking on from your point about experience, right? What I've done in the past, I've been practicing a lot of blended learning, and my students have always been on this both face-to-face and online mode. So when when we talk about assessment, right, as Mimi was bringing it up, the concern about assessment is always how can we be fair to students? I mean, even if we were doing our traditional face-to-face, learning, assessment is always an issue. So it's not a new thing that comes up when we talk about, assessment in terms of online learning. What I've done in the past was I leverage on technology as a tool for my students to express themselves. For example, when they learn a certain topic or a certain project, I will have them reflect, and these reflections are done over their blogs or over video reflection tool and all that, and I assess that. I don't assess the tool, but I assess the content of it. Therefore, the way that we assess is in the front line, not the tool. I mean, those reflections can also be done using paper and pen, no problem. But when we have all this technology, the advantage is that when they do those kinds of activities, they reflect, they do their project logs and all, they put it online, it becomes an advantage for them because now they can use it as a portfolio when they want to, go for employment and all that. And I do have students who actually has got 100% success rate in getting employed because of her portfolio that she did with me. So we do have that record before COVID. And I have done, I have looked at a lot of e-portfolios from other universities as well. And where I studied at Virginia Polytechnic Institute in the United States, they are big on e-portfolio as an assessment. So when we look at assessment as something that is part and parcel of learning, then the design of it should not be, should not have all of these questions. Are we being fair to the students? Are we, what about the disadvantage? They don't have all of these skills and all that. Well, what is the assessment? It is to gauge how much we have learned. It's to see whether the teaching and learning that we have done, we have conducted, worked or not, and whether the students are achieving what they're supposed to do. So that's the very essence of assessment. The thing is, we focus too much on the grading, on whether the students will get the A, whether the A is deserving or not. Well, that is up to us, up to the instructors to decide whether the students are deserving of that A or B or C. So I think in terms of assessment for online learning, we go back again to the fundamentals of why we do assessment, why is the assessment there? And there are multiple ways that we can do it. Even in an online environment, we can go as low tech as possible. They don't have to do all of these fancy videos and stuff like that. They can just go on, in Malaysia, WhatsApp is popular. They can go on WhatsApp and type in their reflections, and we can have regular assessment as how we did, but technology is just there to enable the submission and enable us to grade and stuff like that. So that's probably my take on assessment, Mimi, and Prof. Nan and Prof. Gloria.
Yeah, I think you have your point there. It's in terms of whether it's fair or not. But then again, what about whether the students just copy paste, or whether they're cheating, they're copying from their friends and things like that? So how do we ensure that thing? Yes, Prof. I think Prof. Gloria has something to say.
I think this is one of the ways in which being creative can be very helpful, because if we design our assessment in such a way that it's contributing to the learning of the students and demands something of them, in my experience, I find it actually helps to overcome these issues of students simply copying something, because the kind of tasks I would set, where it really requires them to think hard through the issues, cannot be addressed simply by copying from elsewhere. And also, the more we can make it link directly to their own current experience and their own current situation, the more we come away from that idea of asking them to do something that's so generalized they can copy it from elsewhere. So to give you one example, when I've been teaching university academics, one of the tasks I had set for them has been to redesign a course that they are currently teaching, or a course they could be asked to teach within their own field. And so that's not something they can copy from the internet. They might get ideas from elsewhere about what that design might look like, but then of course, using the research literature, they would have to justify why they're designing it as they are and what are the constraints that operate on what they can do. So no two people in those courses could have come up with exactly the same answer. Even if they were teaching it within a common course, they were often responsible for different parts of that course. And so it seems to me that's one way of getting around that issue of people simply plagiarising material from elsewhere. We need to be thoughtful and creative in the design of the assessment tasks.
Yep, I agree with Prof. Gloria.
Absolutely. I agree entirely. And an example, I don't know how many of you are teacher educators, but an example from teacher education is where I put together a little prompt video of a student knocking at the staff room door asking for help of various sorts. There were a couple of different of problems that they were asking for help with, and the students, the pre-service teachers, were asked to create a 5-minute video of themselves responding to that student's question. It's an example of providing them with a technologically supported prompt and also providing a platform for them to demonstrate and to learn through with the assessment. They then had to support their video with a written piece explaining how their response was informed by literature and theory. So, you know, I absolutely agree with Gloria that, you know, creativity is the key. But I get back to my first point. Most of the people that we talk about as having been engaged in technology for a long time are skilled, and not everybody is skilled.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, that's right. Because you do have students who prefer face-to-face traditional learning rather than online, because I do have some students like that. They feel intimidated when they have to do online learning. They prefer to have face-to-face communication or face-to-face interactions with the lecturers or the teachers. So how do you actually deal with that? Yes,
Okay,
Rosemaliza.
Sorry, I just need to comment. It's a bit like saying that you don't like pens or you don't like a book. It's how the book or the pen is being used or you're being drawn into it that is important. And students might well say, I don't like online education, but what do they mean? What is it they don't like? That would be the question.
Yeah. Yeah. About students not liking online learning. Teachers don't like online teaching. So I suppose the feeling is mutual, right? And the thing is, it's not about liking or not liking. It's something new that people are transitioning into. We have always talked about the power of online learning before this because of the technology, because of the devices, the personal devices that we have. And people in the education field want to leverage as much as possible on the advantages of, you know, connectivity. We are connected. So we talked about self-directed learning, self-regulated learning, self-determined learning. So all of these wonderful, you know, ways of learning emerge because of technology. I mean, how many people learn from YouTube every day? So if we have a student who say that they don't like online learning, it's not that they don't like learning online. It's probably the experience that is not, you know, very much favorable because of the design of the course. Like I said, going back to my earlier point, if we want an impactful online learning experience, we've got to go back to the drawing board. I mean, why are people going, keep on coming back to YouTube and stuff like that to learn? It's because of the experience. It's because, you know, when somebody goes online and learn a new skill and they test that skill on their own and it works, it motivates them to learn more. So when they are motivated to learn more, they will come back for more. Therefore, when we design our instructions online, our classes and all that, we have to have those motivational elements. When they come into our class with us, what improvement have they made after they have joined our session, for example? Can they, can they say a new theory? Can they do something new? So that motivating factor is what brings people back to online learning. So when students say they don't like it, that means they're not getting anything from it. And when teachers say they don't like it, they're probably not having a good experience teaching as well. Going back to, I remember an instructional design model called the ARTS model by John Keller, where John Keller says when you design, for learning, for an instruction, first you have got to grab the student's attention. When they first join your class, they come to you. What would be something that would trigger their curiosity? What would make them stay in your class? Grab their attention. And then secondly, we have got to make the material relevant to the students. Then when the students see that the material is relevant, oh, hey, I can relate to this material. Yes, I need this material. This material is wonderful for my, for my growth and stuff like that. Then they will stay in our class. Make it relevant. Third, when they see the relevance of the material, they will learn, and then it will it will build their confidence in using the knowledge that they gained or in using the skills that they have gained. So first, grab the student's attention. Second, make it relevant. Third, build their confidence in using that new piece of information for their own benefit. And then finally, when the cycle is complete, the student will become satisfied with the learning experience, and they will come back to the same teacher for more. They will come back to us for more. So you see, it takes a whole lot of things in designing teaching and learning. It does take a little bit of effort in understanding what is relevant to the students. How can we make it, relatable to them, so that when they have gained something new, it motivates and it makes them stay and makes them come back. Yeah.
There's one thing I'd like to add very briefly, and that is sometimes resistance from students or from teachers can be simply because they don't feel very familiar or very skilled in learning and teaching in the online environments. And I think it's important that we take that into account when we're thinking about design.
All right, thank you very much to all the panelists. So now I think we should go to our last segment, which is question and answer session. So I think Dr. Noor Azhar, you have a question, Dr. Noor Azhar from UTHM.
Good morning to all the panelists and also my other academics in the group. Okay, my concern is actually when we talk about engaging the students' interest, the students' attention. In fact, in physical class, we have certain principles. For example, in terms of class size. Okay, so I would like to have your to have your experience. How actually at your place, how do you maintain the attention, okay, by controlling the class size, especially in synchronous session? Because if you have a very big class, in fact, if in physical class, if you have a very big class, it is very difficult to get their attention. Okay, so how actually, is there any certain principle in terms of education perspective, in terms of the class size? That's one thing. Second thing, like what Dr. Rose was highlighting just now, actually in Malaysia, it is not yet a culture. It is not something new, but it is not yet a culture for online learning. I do agree with that. So I would like to have some sharing of experience, maybe from other countries. Is there any certain incentive or initiative to encourage the encourage participation, involvement for the students, for the students, for the family, okay, for the family as well, and also in terms of technology support. Because I think when I talk about when I say about technology in Malaysia, sometimes it is not the students who are not ready to change. It is not the educators who are ready to change, but we get frustrated because of the technology support, the internet speed, the safety and security of the materials. You know, for if we use wrong platforms, sometimes maybe we can easily lose the materials, or maybe the assessment results, things like that. Okay, or to, in fact, to give real-time feedback, sometimes we have all these constraints. Okay, so can we have some experience sharing in terms of these two issues? Thank you.
All right, anyone would like to take up that question?
Okay, I'm game. With respect to class sizes, it's you know, I'm very old, and going back to last millennium, there was this view that using technology would mean that we wouldn't have to have lectures anymore. We wouldn't need to package up class groups into small packets, that we could have as many students as we liked involved in a class, and that the workload reduction would be amazing for academics. Well, I think we're sort of there again, because I've seen very little change in the approach to class sizes for technology. We still have classes of 300 for lecture rooms. But there's been a move toward actually combining some tutorials to get some efficiencies, shall we say, with technology and so forth. So I think what you raise there is really vital. We need to be thinking about the learner experience and the learner engagement. And it's not okay if you're going to have a tutorial to just smash together a number of tutorials and have, you know, 60 students in front of you if you're actually looking for a tutorial type experience. It seems to me that the design of the engagement and the timetabling of those synchronous experiences need to follow the same patterns that we have in some respects with face-to-face with respect to class sizes. But I'm very, very happy to have comment or disagreement from my colleagues.
Thank you.
In terms of class size, just now when you're talking about engagement, yeah, I concur with Prof. Nan. It's the same. It's the same as face-to-face and online. So we try to reduce the one-way interaction, try to increase two-way. What I have experienced before is I've joined an online series of classes, and there was this one particular that I like. The instructor only, had the synchronous session for 1 hour, and he used the camera function very, very effectively in getting the students, in getting the learners engaged, right? For example, I think if you guys are decent, right? If you guys are decent, you can switch on your cameras. I'm not sure what it will do to the bandwidth though, but if you're decent, switch on your cameras and let's do this activity together and see if you can follow me. All right, Ken? All right, so if you guys are decent, switch on your camera. Now I want you to, raise your right hand and give me a number 4. Raise right hand, give me number 4. And then your left hand, give me like a 7. Give me like a 7. All right. Okay, so now this is 4, this is 7. Now I want you to point the 7 to the 4, like that. Okay, and now when I say switch, I want you to switch. Therefore, this hand becomes 7, and this hand becomes 4, and it shoots like that. Okay, are we ready? Okay, initial position. Ready, 1, 2, switch. 1, 2, switch. 1, 2, switch. 1, 2, switch. All right, awesome. So, and also, the instructor would do this from time to time just to get people to engage, and he doesn't speak for more than 3 or 4 minutes. The thing is, we don't need any fancy tools. We can just use our hands. I've also joined a session where the instructor was a very, very effective storyteller. The content was delivered very effectively because of his facial expressions, and he gets us excited even though we are online. It's like watching TV. You get emotional when you watch certain shows. So that's how we keep people engaged online. That's an idea that I have gone through, and also to maximize the use of the chat box. Now, for example, I want to see how many people respond, right? So I'm going to ask you a question, and you're going to type it into the chat box. Now, how many of you, I want to see how many of you can remember Prof. Nan's online pedagogy principles just now when she mentioned about online pedagogy principles to design. I know number 1 is learning is active. Number 2 is authentic. Learning is socially mediated. Number 4, learning is activated by language. What's number 5? Type into the chat box. What was her 5th principle? Excellent. So we've got responses. Oops. Oh no. There we go. Learning is personal. Yay. So Prof. Nan, there you go. You've got wonderful students in here today. So this is how we can leverage on just this, Google Meet tool to keep people engaged. So we don't have to talk all the time. I mean, it's very, very tiring to get people to talk all the time. And also just simple engagements, that you can use whatever is in there. You can also get people to switch on their mics for a short while to give an applause. So things like this are engaging. So whatever that we do face to face, usually I would say, what's the word? We take for granted what we do face to face. Now, when we shift into online, we crave for all of this engaging activities. It's just simple, actually. Yeah. So I hope that that answers about engagement. And to how to keep a lot of people engaged with you online. It's not easy. You can't get everybody just like face-to-face. In face-to-face sessions, there will be students who sleep. There will be students who are not paying attention, just the same as online. So don't get too frustrated with it. Okay. And then, yeah, about the incentive and all that. I mean, I'm from Malaysia as well. So I don't know if Prof. Gloria can give us some insights on what Australians do to get people to, be more online. I'm not sure. Thank you.
I think for me, one of the important principles is, as both you and Nan mentioned, to actually get the students actively involved. And that can be by carefully thinking about a question you pose early in a lecture, for instance, and then returning to your question from time to time, as well as asking the students to come up with responses that may relate to some part of your question. And you can do that by having them simply take a note of it using pencil and paper, or you can use your technologies in their phones with simple apps that allow them to actually contribute to a running tally of how many students are responding in certain ways. But I think that the important principle is to have the students actively engaged in what's going on in terms of the learning. And I think that I think it's not possible that every lecturer is going to be so charismatic that they can carry the students by lecturing non-stop for, say, an hour. Most people cannot do that, I would want to argue. And that's why it's so important to break up the delivery, whether it's online or face-to-face, I would say, by having the students actually engage with the content in a more active way. And sometimes that can mean sitting and discussing something with someone beside them and then making a contribution to a tally of responses, or raising hands in the lecture theatre. I think there are a whole range of ways we can do that with and without technologies. And that's the same in an online environment. But it's important that we try to bring the students into the lecture rather than having a one-way delivery in either context.
Yes, I think there's one question in relation to sum it up, it's like saying, how would you customize the online teaching and learning? Because there would be students who would disappear, or students who would be attentive and things like that. So I guess what you have just discussed, Professor Gloria and Dr. Rose, and also even Professor Nan have discussed earlier, I think that answers the question. Is that so, Aisha, Mohamed, Rehan? I hope that answers the question. All right. Okay, so any more question? Any other question? All right, I have a question.
Dr. Mimi, I have a question.
All right, can I know who the person is?
I'm live from UTHM.
All right.
So just now, Dr. Rose has mentioned that the use of technology sometimes is not fair for the disadvantaged student who live in rural area, who don't have a stable internet connection. So, and this is a type of inequality from my point of view. All right, so when we talk about inequality, we always focus on disadvantaged students, right? Students who don't have advanced electronic gadget, who don't have stable internet connection. So we try to minimize our online learning activities because of that group. So do you think that it is not fair also to the advantaged student? Because those students who have better access to the internet, they deserve to have a better online learning experience. But because of those disadvantaged students, we, we don't provide quality teaching for those advantaged students. So how are we going to balance this situation? That's my question.
Okay, thank
I
you.
would want to say that that the way to do that is to provide challenging tasks that can be addressed at different levels. So we're always going to have a range of abilities in our classrooms and in our courses online. And it seems to me that the kinds of tasks we give need to be open enough that they can be addressed at different levels of achievement and different levels of capability. So that would be one way I would address the difference, because they need to be challenging enough that the very experienced or very able students are able to take them much further than somebody who might be less experienced in just that kind of area or that kind of task. But I think we can easily fall into talking about advantaged and disadvantaged students in terms of their capacities, when very often the students are more capable or more experienced in particular parts or fields or tasks, but they might be less experienced in other tasks or other areas of the content. And I think it's important to keep that in mind as well.
yeah, addressing this as well. When I spoke about the shift, remember, first was from public space to personal space. The second was from one size fits all to individualized and personalized. The ideal design would be to design towards the needs of the students and also the capacity that the students have. That would be ideal. But then again, we as lecturers, we would know best on how to assess our own students based on their capabilities and capacities. So my take on this would be, I would always design for the most optimum, the most challenging, and so far, alhamdulillah, my students actually work towards it. If they are really not able to do it, they will tell us sincerely, but they will always struggle. And I always like to bring up an example of my colleague, a UTHM lecturer. I think I've mentioned her several times in a lot of workshops like this, in a lot of seminars. She teaches diploma in engineering, I think, in UTHM, and her students are mostly B40. She has managed to do synchronous assessment online, and all of her students managed to somehow get access to connection at that particular time that she wanted them to have it. She was doing a trial run with that assessment, and she was successful. And she uses tools like Flipgrid. She uses, she uses a lot of Google tools as well. See, the thing is, she said, her students are willing to do anything for her class. And that is what is wonderful about us as educators. If we are able to motivate and ignite the passion in them towards learning, they will, the students will. We have got to give it to them. The students are really struggling, but at the same time, they want this for themselves. So yeah, try that, yeah, inshallah.
All right, we have a question from Reese Tiongson from Philippines. The Philippines, a long way. All right, so the question is, what do you think is the best way to sustain student engagement throughout the course asynchronously? Because earlier you mentioned about synchronous, now it's asynchronously. For example, posting on forum enough? So what do you think about how we should evaluate student engagement, since it is difficult to do so? By the way, Prof. Nan has to leave us because she has a meeting going on at 2 o'clock, or 2 o'clock Australian time, so 12 o'clock Malaysian time. All right, so any takers? Dr. Rose, Prof. Gloria?
I would want to say that I think there is no best method to do anything. It will depend very much on who the students are, what the context is, what the content is, what the course goals are, what the purposes are for educating the students in that course and in that context. So I'm always very wary of proclaiming something as a best method. But I do think that in the asynchronous environment, that many of the same principles apply, so that if we have students who are engaged in coursework that's relevant for them, that relates to their experience, that draws on that experience, then we're more likely to engage them. So I think there's no one method. It depends very much on what we're trying to teach and why.
Okay. I hope that answers your question, Reese. All right, so there's another question. What about courses that really need hands-on? This is from Farida Abubakar. Hands-on, that really needs hands-on experience. For example, showing students video of instruments will never be the same as the students looking at the real instrument, or perhaps courses that requires the students to go to labs and things like that.
Okay. I think for hands-on experience, for hands-on classes, we are allowed to go back to campus, right? I have been having this conversation with the Polytechnic lecturers, I think a few weeks back before the announcement came out, and I gave them suggestions that you should put forward that the students should be able to come back to the campuses for the instruments, because really you can't really do welding at home, can you? Right? And yeah, lab-based subjects, you need the equipment. But then again, I've seen innovations where instructors have used virtual reality tools in terms of getting the students to be familiar with equipment. I was also having a conversation with my colleague at UTHM. She teaches mass communication, and she was supposed to teach camera works and stuff like that. So they were looking at going into the VR world for the students to learn about camera works and productions. I'm not sure. I think she's in this room right now. I think Dr. Emma, let me see. Let me find her. Oh, she probably left. But yeah, they were talking about using the VR space for that. Of course, the tools are under development still. We need to work fast, and let's hope that we can come back to campus for all of this hands-on needs. Yeah.
All right, I think we, yes, Professor Gloria.
No, that's fine. That's fine. You go ahead.
Sorry. So I think we have time for one more question. If there's any question from the audience. Okay, we have this from this question from Fawaz Siddiqui. Are we learning on technology way too much and losing the human-to-human experience in time and space? Anyone? Dr. Rose, Professor Gloria?
Prof. Gloria, you want to take that one?
Yes, I'm happy to. I think that that's always a risk, as it is a risk in face-to-face context to lean too much on content or lean too much on presentation technologies and so on. I think, this is in a sense where I started my presentation with the idea that it's really important that we keep very central the purposes of higher education. Why are we educating our students? For what purposes? What are they to contribute to? And I think if we can keep that in very clear focus, and I want to say I think it's a very big challenge always for all of us. But if we keep returning to that question, I think it helps us to keep the human element in there, both from the point of view of us and what we provide, and also from the point of view of our students and educating them in a genuine way.
Dr. Rose, would you like to say anything to that question?
I'm also interested in the next question that I see by Sabrina. Sabri, are we also losing out on the development of character? So the thing is about humanizing experience, yeah? Online learning is a method of delivery. It is something that we can leverage on to get a lot of content out. It takes a village to raise a child. So it does not just take the university to develop character. It takes the whole society. It takes the parents, it takes friends, it takes the media, everything. So if we, the lecturers, can put out, become role models to them, then there would be no issue of, all of this technology taking away the human side of it. Even if we post on social media as well, how do we post? What do we post? How are we role models to them online as well? So this builds character. So like think Nahariah Mohamed said balance between technology, human. It's up to humans actually. Do we want to put the technology in front, or do we want to put the human element in front? This is what IIUM is fighting for. IIUM is fighting for humanizing education. That's why we are one of the to shift towards online learning in April. We are just starting this month in June because we wanted to get everything in place. We didn't want to jump into, leaving students behind with technology and stuff like that. That's why we were late. We took so much time because we were focusing on the human element. But then again, learning has to go on. Therefore, goes back to the goal of education. Who are we producing? What do we want our students to be when they leave the university? What does UTHM want their graduates to be known as, right? So that comes back to the fundamentals. It doesn't matter whether it is face-to-face, it's online. We can have all of our face-to-face all we want, but at the end of the day, if we are not interacting with our students as how role models should be, then the outcome is not going to be good as well. It doesn't matter, online, not online, technology, no technology, we are all in this together, and lecturers have got to play this role offline and online. So becoming role models online is not as easy as becoming offline. So that's my response to this question.
All right, I think that's all the time that we have for the question and answer session. So if you have more questions, you can contact the panelists.
My question is, please, Prof, my question is there, please. I'm from UTHM. There, please read the question and ask, please.
All right, so just one more last question. After this, we are going to wrap up the session. All right, Dur Muhammad Sumro, what's your question? Hello? Hello? All right, so I think we will wrap up.
Sorry. Prof, I didn't open the speaker. Actually, thanks to Prof. Gloria and Prof. Rose, my many question has been replied. Actually, our focus is the student in terms of the learning as well as response. So depending upon the limitations, whether we take the feedback from the students, when they have the low bandwidth and then mobile connection, their data, all is the concern is there. So while we are doing non-face-to-face, even one student have this problem. So what should, as a lecturer, what should I adopt for the delivery as well as assessment? Because I have applied many tricks and trends, at the end I make a conclusion that I should go for the screen recording. And the screen, I'm very happy that a student can understand it and then respond well. So what is your experience, please? Thank you very much.
That would be answered best by yourself, Dr. Dur Muhammad Sumro, because your students and my students are different. Yeah, and my students and Prof. Gloria's students are different. So that's the needs analysis that you need to do before you do any instruction. So your design would depend on what your students are capable of, what they have access to, and also depends on your content. So whatever works best for you, go on and do it. All the best.
All right, so I will let the panelists to wrap up. If you want to close whatever that we have been discussed, we'll go to Dr. Rose first.
I would like to thank the organizer at UTHM, Dr. Mimi, and also the team for having us here. My last word is do whatever it takes for learning to go on, and go back to the original intention of us being here, which is to inculcate the learning culture, and inshallah everything will fall into place. And do not be so uptight when things don't work. We're all in this together. There's no theories whatsoever for COVID-19 learning. So everything is trial and error. I think we're doing good right now. I think we're doing good, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rose. Professor Gloria?
I would like to also say thank you for the opportunity to speak with all of you today. The discussion has been very interesting, especially hearing some more about the Malaysian context. And I suppose I would just try to encourage all of us to be as thoughtful and as informed as we can be in designing our teaching and working on the learning of our students. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Gloria, Dr. Rose, and also Professor Nan. She has to leave us earlier because she has a meeting going on, so she said goodbye earlier. All right, so thank you very much, everybody, for participating. So if you would like to contact the panelists, Dr. Rose, Professor Gloria, Professor Nan, you can just scroll the chat box on your right-hand side. I have already put out the email address of all the panelists there. So if you have further questions, you can contact them directly. And I think Professor Nan has also given somewhat like a URL for the transcript of her presentation today, I think. So you can go to that website as well and see what material that she has put up. All right, thank you very much, everybody, for participating, for being here today. And with that, Assalamualaikum and good day. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Gloria. Thank you, Rose. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Mimi. Thank you.